Hi, everybody. Frank Gladstone from asifa-hollywood. Glad to be here today with some very special people. I want to make sure I get everybody right. These are representatives from two of the really major animation studios in today's world. LAIKA, Stop Frame Studio. I call it Stop Frame because I'm really old-fashioned. And also Cartoon Saloon, which is just released its third picture, I think in a trilogy. I guess I could call it the Irish trilogy. Is that fair? So first from LAIKA, we have Ariane Suttner. Where are they? She's right down there. And then we have Brad Schiff. Brad's over here. And then we have, I'm going to not say your last name, Thibaut. Thibaut.
Leclerc.
Yeah, you don't want to, anyway. And then from Cartoon Saloon, Tom Moore and Ross Stewart and Nora Twomey. Did I say that right, Nora? Did I say your last name correctly?
No, it's Toomey. It's easier.
Just like two. So I might get it. And then Tom is fixing his camera.
Apologies. Yeah.
That's okay. So the first thing I'd like you to do is tell us what you basically do at your various studios. So we'll start with the Cartoon Saloon folks. Let's go with Nora first. What do you do, Nora? Basically.
Well, on Wolfwalkers, I was a producer. On The Breadwinner, as a director. I'm one of the founding members with Tom Moore and Paul Young. So I have many hats. So between kind of studio owner and creative kind of hats, a little bit of everything, pretty much.
And Ross, how about you?
I was one of the directors of Wolfwalkers. Tom was the other one. And in my time at Cartoon Saloon, I was art director and I did backgrounds and a bit of animation and a bit of everything. I also probably might be the only one here to have worked in LAIKA and Cartoon Saloon. So I've kind of got a foot on both sides of the line. But
you're the bridge in this particular
Colossus of Rhodes.
Yeah, it's great to see. It's great to see some old faces from LAIKA here. It's really nice.
You were on Paranorman, right?
Yeah. I was really hoping that with this publicity thing, I could go back and see some of my old friends. But sure, seeing them virtually is better than none at all, you know.
Now, years ago, when I went over to LAIKA to see the studio, they had this really great frozen daiquiri machine that was excellent, but I think they put it in their closet somewhere. But it was really good. Tom, what do you do? What do you do over at Cartoon?
I'm in charge of the frozen daiquiris.
Excellent. And now we're going to move over to LAIKA. So Ariane, what is your job there?
I make frozen margaritas. But I'm a producer and head of production, and along with Travis Knight. Tom Moore kind of worked on a little bit on
Paranorman, yeah.
What did you work on, Tom?
Did some concepts with Ross. Even if you look at the art of Paranorman book, there's a lovely big color picture that is credited to Ross Stewart.
Oh, not this
that
again.
is so obviously by a better artist.
How you?
Tom, you'll be 90
later.
years. Yeah, 90 years of age, you'll still be bitter about that picture.
I'll never get over it.
Thibaut, I'm going to you next. What's your job over at the?
I'd like I'm lead a character designer, so I'm creating the lead characters and overseeing the design through the character development.
Excellent. And finally, last but not least, Brad, what are you up to?
I'm the head of animation here, and I supervise all the animation in our films, other than Coraline. I wasn't supervising Coraline. That was Anthony Scott.
There you go. So I'm going to ask a few questions. The first one is, both of your studios kind of specialize in the oldest forms of animation, the very first ones. In fact, the very first, I teach animation history at Cal State, and in some research, I found that the actual probably first real film animator was a Russian guy. And he did both paper animation and stop frame, about 1904. We're not sure the dates. but he did both of those things. What gravitated, any of you can answer this, what gravitated your studio towards 2D and also with stop frame? Anybody want to?
I think for us, it was just the tradition in Ireland. We all trained in the Ballyfermot College in Dublin, which was set up by Don Bluth, you know. So he was kind of setting up a training college for his studio that was gone by the time we graduated, but we'd been trained in like classical animation. But one of the funny things is we never worked on cells. Like we were straight into digital ink and paint right from when we set up in 99. And so we didn't really see what it used to be. And then one time Bill Plimpton came to visit, and I have some of his work framed on my wall here. You can't see it, it's off screen, but I saw that he cut out his drawings that he drew on paper and stuck them on cells. And just that little bit of relief made something, like a little bit of, you know, lifted off the cell, made something go in my head that it's all basically stop frame, you know, like hand drawn, like when it was painted on frame, they were just little objects that were placed under the camera that were moving incrementally. So in some ways, you know, the roots are the same.
Yeah, I think so. Even CG, I always say it's just moving a digital puppet.
Yeah, I think with CG it's getting blurrier with the motion capture. That's when it's starting to become something else. Rotoscope.
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons we didn't do CG though, I don't know if you remember, Nora and Tom, is that we just didn't have computers. Like
we had
in our final year in college, there was one guy using Photoshop for backgrounds, and we thought it was so futuristic. And then when Cartoon Saloon started, there was one.
He was from the future,
and we all had to like take turns on the computer. So
yeah, we had
CG was just not even in our realm.
It was what we knew, but it was also what we knew how to make look good without a huge amount of money. Like we never had much money, and certainly in the early years, in the first 10 years, even 15 years, we didn't have a huge amount of money. So we knew how to make that look good. We had always kind of attracted 2D animators and designers, and all of the, you know, our crew were all kind of 2D. There is some 3D in our films, but it's kind of masked to look like it's 2D, but we could make it look timeless, and we knew how to do it, and we knew how to put the story on the screen the best way we could, I guess, with 2D as well.
One I'd say rather than 2D, yeah.
And I know that, you know, the beginning of LAIKA was actually Will Vinton's studio. I mean, that was the basic starting point. So he had started in stop frame, but the idea that would be what you all would invest your time in. What drove you towards stop frame?
I think, for me, it was probably accidental, but when I look back on it, it all kind of makes sense, having had a personal like obsession with off the red-nosed reindeer. So stupid at this point to say that, but the company, like you said, was kind of born out of a company that existed, and Travis Knight is the owner of it. You know, he's just a superlative stop motion animator. He's really good, and his heart, and as an artist, he's really with it. And so kind of just wanted, as do we, to grow with it. And at this point, I feel like it's kind of morphed into something that is unique to our studio, like a special kind of process. And it's neat.
Yeah, I think Travis has a real passion for stop motion, as many of us here do, and see the opportunity and potential in the medium that has yet to be realized. You know, so I think we're constantly trying to push what's possible in stop motion here to make films unlike what you've seen before.
What drew you to stop motion, though, Brad?
I couldn't draw. So, but I discovered I had the ability to sculpt. So stop motion it was.
And Thibaut, I've looked at a couple of your student films, which are stop motion as well. And also one that was a kind of a combination of 3D environments and 2D work. What did you think stop motion when you were you were at Gobelin, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was at Gobelin. I was really into 2D because I was, my way to express myself has always been drawing since the beginning, especially through characters. But going to animation, I started to really experiment all techniques of animation at the beginning, and and I tried stop motion like really a while ago, when I was 18, even before Goblins. And I think I've been really interested in the medium, and this kind of having like really to, because for me it's kind of the same thing with 2D, where it's suddenly really magical to have like a drawing or physical puppet or toy getting to life again in front of you. It's just, there's, for both medium, there is like this kind of magical thing that's kind of reconnect to, you know, when you're kids and just see animation movies, and it's just amazing for you. I think that this both technique for me really connected.
You know,
And,
that's kind of a segue to my next question, actually. So you've done very nicely there. What is it? And I ask this question of my students on occasion. What is it that makes people still in this day of, you know, very high tech and realistic looking stuff, makes people still gravitate towards these two disciplines? When I talk to students, they all want to work in either stop frame or traditional animation. What is it, and what drives audiences after all this time?
I think Thibaut might have hit on something there. There's a magic to the craftsmanship. There's a suchness. You can feel the hands of the artist on the screen. I mean, sometimes people are surprised where the hybrid happens, but overall there's a sense that this is something handcrafted frame by frame, and that adds a kind of a timelessness as well. Like CG is always getting better and better at rendering, so that newly rendered CG movies look better than the one from the year before. Whereas I think stop motion and hand drawn have a timelessness to them.
Yeah,
I think so too. Yeah.
I think you're right. With stop motion, there's an inherent tactility, you know, that comes along with it. And I think, you know, you guys did it in Wolfwalkers. Just seeing the pencil lines was, you know, you really get a sense that it's handmade and it is beautiful.
Yeah, I always think of that, like even in other art forms, that people tend to really appreciate something that looks a little bit more organic or a little bit more handmade too. You know, like if you buy a mug that's been made in an assembly line by a machine, and you buy one that's been made by hand and you see thumbprints in it, people naturally will gravitate towards that, you know, because they kind of go, wow, I can see that somebody actually put some work into that. There's a creation in it.
But if you're in a restaurant and it's an assembly line mug and you see thumbprints on it, you gravitate away from it, especially in COVID times.
I think there are companies or the look of our, I see some similarities in how carefully, well, everybody is working really carefully on their movies, but I don't know. I don't want to say that. It always makes me, shows my preferences, but we also use, you know, real light, as he was saying, and I think there makes a difference there, but there's probably an obsessional similarity between both companies, really obsessing with this kind of a unique style of filmmaking that's very special to, I think, Cartoon Saloon. It's not like I can go see other, I don't know exactly how you guys are making your movies. It's still kind of a mystery to me. And I think that same could be said for LAIKA. I don't think people know exactly. It's very unorthodox. It's it doesn't make any sense. And I think it produces things that both companies look very specific and very different from. And I don't know if that draws audiences to it, but I do think it just, you know, it shows up in the theater. It's different from a lot of other things that are out there.
Do you feel like your studios have house styles? Do you feel like that Cartoon Saloon has a style that people can recognize, and that LAIKA has a style that sets it different? Than you feel that way, or do you think that
hopefully it's more an approach, Frank, on our side? And I'd say it's the same with LAIKA, because you know, you have different artists and they all bring something different every time. But when you take a certain approach to how you make films and your end goal is for it to feel handmade, then the style is sort of secondary, because the style can be quite a superficial thing. And a good example is, we're just talking about process and style. I have a friend who worked in CG in Aardman for a while, doing like effects and things like that. And someone did a test of the main plasticine chickens in Chicken Run, but with CG, and they even put the thumbprints in, you know. And Nick Park was like, yeah, but then I wouldn't get to work with the puppets and the plasticine all day, you know. And I think that speaks to a lot of it as well. It's how you want to spend your day, what you want to spend your day doing, and having an approach that's hands-on makes a style rather than, you know, because you could replicate hand-drawn probably would fancy CG and stuff. And sometimes it looks great, like Spider-Verse or whatever, but we just prefer to draw. So I'm sure there's something of that in LAIKA.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Well, sometimes it's the opposite. Well, people will say our style is so smooth and so naturalistic. Why are we doing it that way? Because it could look like, you know, CG, but we prefer to do it this way, and we think it's better. And Brad and his cohorts really like playing with dolls.
Yeah,
That would be the same on the computer.
yeah. I mean, we shoot on ones, you know, so we were able to get a lot of finesse and nuance in the animation that you know other studios don't do, because it's ridiculous to shoot 24 movements a second when you could do 12 and it looks lovely. But you know, you look at the two and it's a lot cleaner. It's got, you know, more nuanced. Our style's naturalistic, so I think it stands out in that sense, definitely.
There is that human element, though. It's not the movement from one pose to another is not driven by a machine. It's you have to just do it.
You're not working against in-betweens that are being put there for you. I like as well, just with drawing, that you can get everybody to draw the same way. I don't know, but in school you can tell everybody has a different way of drawing. You can tell with your crew that everybody draws differently, but yet you can kind of communicate and work as one in a way that makes everybody have the same kind of, you know, a performance for, you know, central character or whatever. They all have an understanding of the physicality and how that character expresses. When whole, you know, groups of people work together to make something together, and push their own experiences in through this, like especially like a you know, a main protagonist or a central set of relationships, that's it still is magic, I think, you know, when you get, you know, entire groups of people to work like that, and with the inherent flaws that are in any kind of like a handcraft. They're the right kind of flaws, the ones that remind you that you're human, and the ones that you see like 10 years afterwards, but you don't see. I guess they're timeless as well, right? So, you know, Paranorman, for example, my jaw drops watching the animation in that, and the performances in that, and the fact that they're so well observed, but then pushed into a sensibility of their own as well. That's completely timeless, and I know that I could come back in 30 years and watch it again and still have my jaw drop on the floor from that same kind of thing, but not I'm not going to be looking at, oh well, that was the fancy stuff that was going on in, you know, in that era of whatever the technological breakthroughs were, for example. You know, that there's a timelessness to handcrafts that are timeless.
How long because you were saying how it's it's such a feat to get all the artists moving in the same direction and adopting a style and adopting or the features of the characteristics of one character. How long does it take you guys? Like when you're in production, how long is it? Because that's something we talk about here all the time, and I always think it's so hard to have it. It's especially during COVID, but it's hard to keep the style intact. How do we not have it drift if we're shooting for 3 years? Hope, knock on wood, hopefully not. But you know, how long does that take you guys?
I don't think you're finished until you're finished the movie, right, Nora? Like sometimes, like there was like little things that we discovered at the beginning of Wolfwalkers, like a little head shake for Robin that we said, oh, let's make that part of her personality, and we kind of brought it into the Wolf performance. But definitely some of the performance at the beginning, at the end you'd go back and reanimate it if you only had the rest of your life to keep remaking the same thing, you know. So it does keep evolving, you know what I mean? But yeah. Suppose you spend how long did we spend, Ross? Like 2 or 3 years in development before production?
In development, I suppose, like you could say from the first time we started doing concept art, that was the start of development and stuff. So that was 5 years.
Yeah,
really,
so it is. That's
4 years.
Similar to us too, so long, and I think it is such a feat to have all these individual artists, and yet at the end, to the audience, we hope that, you know, Wolfwalkers looked so in style and cohesive, and
what was crazy was
imagine it.
Yeah, it was crazy was we've always had teams in like France and Luxembourg as partners, and what was lovely was this time we were working with a lot of old friends who'd been through the wars, and like our partners in the studio in Luxembourg had worked on Breadwinner just before, while Ross and I were developing Wolfwalkers. Then they moved on to Wolfwalkers, so they were kind of warmed up in a sense, but it was a completely different style, of course. But yeah, there was this familiarity that came with working with the same teams that maybe helped a cohesiveness that we maybe didn't. On Secret of Kells, we were really like, you know, scrapping around, just trying to get it made. Whereas it felt like we were into a pipeline by the time we were doing Wolfwalkers. It felt like we benefited from Breadwinner. And I'm sure it's the same with you guys, that you've kind of, you know, you've got a pipeline now that you're able to keep on improving and tweaking, right?
Absolutely.
So-
I think returning crew and that sensibility and having a shorthand really helps for sort of pulling all in the same direction.
Yeah, it's cool having a studio where you're making film after film, and all the artists have an opportunity to grow and to learn and to get better and to work, you know, as a team better. And it's
Well,
really
that maturing of your team is really important in any studio. I remember the Warner Brothers guys used to say by the time they'd been working on those shorts for so long, they didn't have to finish sentences. You know, they just said, "Oh yeah," you know, that was that. But that's 20 years in. You know, 20.
It's really hard these days in right now, just in the business side of it, to kind of keep people. That's becoming a bigger challenge.
Which is amazing for the art form, right? That there's that much work and that people have
I
choices.
was saying it's harder for
For us, it's
put
harder.
together, harder for us, but not.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
It's good for the art form to think that there's that much stop motion and hand drawn going on. I
It's
love
good for
that.
my viewing pleasure, that's for sure.
You know, I'm gonna tell a story then real quick. I had dinner with Ray Harryhausen about 2 weeks after Jurassic Park came out. And Ray was a friend. We were having dinner and I said, "So Ray, what did you think of Jurassic Park?" And if any of you knew him, he talked, "Well, I thought it was wonderful and it was so realistic. And I don't know how they do it with all those." And I said, "Yeah, but Ray, what do you think about stop frame now that it's come out?" And he said, "Well, Frank, I think all the stop motion and the animators in the world should find a high mountain and jump off." My God. But, and he was correct about that. And his kind of movie, that was kind of over.
Yeah,
But he was
maybe.
thrilled to pieces that stop motion got better. I mean, got more, there was more than there had been when he was doing all his movies. And he was doing that particular kind of, you know, animated creature in a live action environment. But he was thrilled at the fact that LAIKA was around and
he did those fairy tales. Remember, just before he died, he kind of finished these fairy tales that were fully stop motion replacement. So that was kind of more, that was the timeless version, I guess. That wasn't going to get
yeah. That was a really interesting story too.
It's interesting because technologically, like he was it at the time, you know.
Yeah. And he worked alone.
Yeah,
he worked by himself.
And it was the absolute best, you know. And now, you know, technology and materials have changed, and we're just sort of hopefully doing the same thing. And another 10 years, people are going to look back and, you know, maybe
Mm-hmm.
this stuff will be not as slick and clean as the stuff that people are doing in, you know, another decade.
Yeah.
And remember, he used surface gauges. There was no capture at the time. He was using, for those of you, you know,
I don't even know what that
put
is.
it on the shoulder, move a little bit, put it on the shoulder, move, you know, that kind of thing. It was pretty fun. Sometimes it's in the shot. So
Right.
once in a while, I forgot to take one out.
What's amazing about about his work, I'd say on what was it, Jason and the Argonauts and that. Like he would have liked it to be as realistic as possible, but he had to work within the technology he had available at the time. And even when you watch it now, it still has a kind of a timelessness. You know, like even though it didn't get all the way to being as super realistic as he probably would have liked it to be or imagined it to be, it still has this amazing like handcraftedness to it. And in a way, it's actually scarier.
It's spookier, right? Because it's all jerky.
Because it kind of moves all jerky and stuff. It's amazing to see.
This kind of freaky.
This is something that I thought would be interesting now that it's come up, because you've been talking about hand art, both in traditional and in stock frame. And I asked Ray about that because at the time he couldn't do motion blur. There was no such thing unless you put Vaseline on a piece of glass in front of the lens. There was no motion blur, and people said, "Oh, it's." But he said, "Look, we were talking about, he said, I know the thing couldn't be realistic, but I also know it sent you into a dream state. And when I was watching these films as a kid, both in traditional and in stop frame, it does send you into some place other than watching real.
Yeah.
And that has to do with how it
It's
looks.
a liminal, it's a strange liminal place, like the stuff you see before your eyes just before you wake up or something, because you know you're not looking at realism. We're not trying to pretend that the drawing isn't a drawing or the puppet isn't a puppet, but yet they're so believable if the animator is good that you feel emotions for that drawing or for that puppet. So
and then you can do things like change the environment in the design. So the city is, I'm sorry, that's my other phone. The city, straight narrow city, and then suddenly this unbelievable forest city in Wolfwalkers, or how things look in say Paranorman, for instance, where you have the town and then you have when the ghosts come, and it looks different, and you buy it because it's animated, and your suspension of disbelief is immediate.
a little bit
I'm
closer.
always
Yeah.
shocked, you know, when you're like watching the movie for the 100th time in post-production or something, and you're still feeling for the, you know, an animate object that you know exactly what it looks like and how it was put together, and still I, you know, feel something for it. That's the part I love that about animation, all kinds of animation.
Everybody always wants to know this question, so I'm going to ask for two studios right now. Every project that I ever worked on, and I'm sure every project that you've worked on, has a crash and burn moment, maybe more than one. What happens when you're working on a show and you suddenly come up against a wall? How does your studio deal with that?
Frozen daiquiris.
Absolutely.
But that's what you prepare for when you take on a project in the first place. Tom and Paul and myself were discussing this recently. It's not about the wonderful gem of the idea, or you project yourself forward when it does hit the fan, and it does on every production numerous times. And the more you do, the more you realize that, and the more that you can try to plan for it. But then, of course, something else completely different is going to happen anyway. And you just need that's the when you absolutely need each other. I mean, this is the thing, like, you know, everybody they are hard work, and they do fall apart, and there are dark nights of the soul, and there you can't see the wood for the trees and all of this multiple times during any production. We've seen it over and over again. You think the next one's going to be better because now you know what you learned on the last one, and you're not going to make that mistake again, and then something else happens. And you can't avoid that, but it's the commitment that you make on day one. It's when, you know, money comes together and you're building the team, and you know, you can't let it can't fall apart. And a lot of things, even Kel's way back at the beginning of Cartoon Saloon, when we went into production with our first feature, and it was I would say 80% hopeful naivety, and you know, 20% maybe whatever production, you know, smarts that we had gleaned from a couple of short films and a few commercials, but the rest of it was just pushing it to make it work, because we didn't have an option. We didn't have a plan B, and we couldn't let it fall apart, and there were too many people depending on us. And oftentimes that's the only thing that you can push through, and the hope that what you saw in it, maybe when you're a bit fresher, is something that you're going to see again at the end, or it's, you know, but again, just make it, if you have the right group of people around you, and we've been lucky enough over the years to always have that then when you start to stumble, somebody else has your back, you know. And I think that's what we've kind of relied on between us over the years.
When in stop frame, you know, in animation, I get in traditional and especially in CG, you can go back and fix things. It's hard to do in stop frame once you've committed to animating through the sequence. It's hard to go, well, you can take some frames out, I guess, but you can't. What happens when that kind of stuff happens on a set or in a project?
Frank, we do, I mean, the stuff that Nora just really beautifully communicated, and that was kind of touching to me. It happens all the time, but we also just on a shot level, you know, stop motion is careful preparation and planning. So we just make the movie over and over again in boards. And now we do careful previs. We also do it on set practically. So by the time an animator is out there with a puppet, hopefully everything has been communicated and all the problems have been removed, and then that artist can just bring this to life. So it's not crash and burn so much, I think, on that shot level. It's but plenty of times you have a rehearsal, they do it beautifully in rehearsal, and then you get to it and it doesn't work out as you imagine. But our problems are different than that, I would say, or bigger problems. But I always say to people who are just working with me, because it takes such a long time, like 5 years, and they're just devastated when you're in pre-production and we have issues, and I'm like, it's
Marathon.
In the last week of post, and there will be a giant problem. Your main actor will drop out. Like it is just, it won't end, and it'll go all the way through marketing. So you just have to feel that that's part of the process and believe in what you're doing, and lean on people, and hopefully carry people with you, try to support them and say it will be okay. And it's really a marathon, truly, not try not to get too bent out of shape out of the things that will happen day in, day out.
Sometimes you can fix things in design. Sometimes you can design your way out of things, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I think there is like two good points that have been brought up here. It's the preparation that Ariane was talking about. It's like a big part of avoiding future issues. And also when Nora talked about being around the right people, because I think what's really important is like when you work with teams, and I can see that a lot at LAIKA, I'm like having so much like great artists that just doesn't have ego and forget their ego, and just when there is an issue and a big problems are ready to really communicate and understand why there is a problem and compromise on their own work for the best of the big pictures of the movie, and kind of moving forward. And it's always something that is important to keep in mind in design. And we always like having this moment where the design looks good as a 2D element, but he have to serve a purpose of a movie at the end. He has to move, to emote, and so have to be a practical puppet. So that's the really important problem where like it's so amazing to see like artists are like ready to really meet somewhere with the technician, with the rigger, with the animators, and try to find really what is the most optimal for the movie, and not just for your own work. And that I think is really what's avoided.
And well, that comes to another point. In pre-production, you're developing the style, you're developing the look of the world, you're developing what colors you're going to use, when you're going to desaturate or saturate or so forth, and all of that. And you're developing what the characters look like. And of course, it all starts on paper, initially, or on a drawing, even if you're going to work in 3D. How do both of your studios deal with that? Because eventually those initial designs are going to become firm designs that everybody's either going to have to draw or work with puppets that work a certain way. How do you make that jump from the initial designs to what the movie's going to look like, really? And it's not going to look like those initial drawings. They're going to take you somewhere else. And how does that work in your studios?
Yeah. So I can talk for LAIKA because I think that's what is making LAIKA design at the end really special. The fact that as a 2D artist, I'm really annoying at the beginning because I'm just taking 2D reference, like really flat textural, because LAIKA has like this really unique thing that is the fact that he's like Ariane was saying, like real light on real textures, real fabrics, on the puppet. So there's a lot of textual work on design, but there is also like really the fact that on our inspiration, I really speak for character design, but for environment, they do the same too, are really graphic, really illustrative work, really 2D, to being sure like we're really focused on like something visually strong at first. And we don't want to compromise at first because we know that it's the fact that later on the road, some ingenious artist and technician or like even scientist of stop motion is going to have to find like unexpected way to translate this really 2D flat design into a three-dimensional work. So it's going to make this design really special. It's kind of the bridge of these two works that by essence are supposedly opposite, you know, it's 2D versus 3D and not supposed to work together. But the fact that LAIKA find a bridge and a way to transpose it into a three-dimensional work that make the design at the end really strong looking, because it's like the silhouette is strong, the silhouette is still simple, but there is so much refinement, so much sophistication into it, you know, that come from stop motion.
And in 2D, and I look, you know, you've got to do the designs of characters, you got to do simplification passes, you've got to do, or not, maybe, I don't know.
No, we try to not let the process blandify the original designs. Like Ross and I, even since Secret of Kells, but in Wolfwalkers, I think we finally managed it as much as we wanted to, or almost as much as we wanted to, that the concepts ended up on screen. What do you think, Ross? Like we
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to
close.
say the same thing. We're kind of on like a mind meld at the moment, I suppose. That Tom and myself have always been impressed with the concept art of every film. You know, when you look at an art of book and you see absolutely amazing artwork in there, and I think there might tend to be a process sometimes, but that by blandifying it or by like making model sheets, you know, with poses that are stiff, like straight, like robots, that characters can lose some of the energy and character and personality, and backgrounds too, I think. So we always wanted to get that energy and like, I don't know, kind of creative spark that is in the concept work straight onto screen as much as possible, as much as is humanly possible. And I think when we were doing our character model sheets, a lot of the time we would get the character designers that had done the conceptual work to maybe have a pass over it and try and get that kind of energy and that like, you know, creative spontaneity into it. And we would ask animators to maybe not refer to the model sheet with the straight poses, and in turn maybe refer to like dynamic poses to try and get that, like, you know, to avoid them looking like robots, I think.
I remember showing the model sheet artist the Milt Kahl sheets, you know, where he just cut out nice poses, and like they weren't exactly the same from drawing to drawing, and that was part of the charm. And we kind of had to say, all right, here are the model sheets that you can rely on if you're nervous and getting started. We want you to get to a place where you're confident enough that, you know, I love the fact that there's a few different Maves because they're animated by, you know, 3 or 4 amazing animators. She's not wildly off, but I can sense a different artist's hand. And that was something Ross and I loved about Jungle Book and 101 Dalmatians and all those shows that we kind of wanted to have in Wolfwalkers. And we even played with it. We had a very strict, tight model for the townspeople and a much looser, scratchier model for the wolves and for Maeve and for Robin. As she goes from being a townsperson and she has these like really hard geometric lines on her, she becomes scratchier and looser and a little more loose in the model as well, and we were okay with that. Just had to cast the right artist.
And there's construction lines in there. I haven't seen construction lines in animation since 101 Dalmatians.
And we had to fight to leave them in because some of the young artists now are so good that they can like draw just without all that construction. And Ross and I were like, no, leave it sketchy. And they're like, this is my first sketch. I'm like, well, pretend it's sketchy.
Well, that's one of the things about, and when you're doing stop frame, you design something, but then you've got to think, how's that armature going to be? Will that armature carry the puppet? What do we do? Have ball and sockets? What do we can do with wire? And then, of course, in LAIKA's case, the 3D printing process, which starts with animation and then makes your replacements for your faces. Which is, by the way, I have the Kubo and two strings set here. The studio gave that to me. All I need now is a couple of cells from Wolfwalkers. I do have something from Song of the Sea already, you guys. Anything you want to send me, just go right ahead. I'll take it.
What could ever compete with Velvet Popeye? That's the problem.
Popeye.
Nobody wants to have to compete with Velvet Popeye.
Nobody can.
Nobody can.
I have only a couple more questions. The first one is, there is CG in your films. You use CG in certain ways. How?
I want to hear from you guys.
Well, I would say the wolf vision is probably the most unusual use of it because it's not where you'd think. What's on screen when we see the world through the eyes of the wolf is all hand drawn on paper, page by page. And I wish I had a frame here, but it's a fully drawn background on every frame. But to get there, supervisor, Evan, he's actually a stop motion animator as well, came up with a way that he would make stuff in Quill in VR, and then he could show me and Ross the move of the wolf through the forest. Because the very first test we did entirely on paper, and the animator was amazing, and Manuel, but you couldn't ask him for a retake because you couldn't bear to ask a guy who'd animated the entire backgrounds like Dick Williams style to go back and try it again. So we had a few passes like previs, like you guys would do with the Quill software. And then later we moved to Blender. But basically we would plan the shot intricately, and then each frame would be printed and used as a reference for the backgrounds that were drawn. Paper, pencil, charcoal, and madness. Yeah, 3.5 minutes, Ross, in 3 years or something. It was elaborate. But
That's
the CG
great.
was a way to make sure that what we committed to drawing was kind of pretty much right.
And for our CG, so for some of our effects, we'll make sure that we do them practically first, and then give them to
Oh,
that.
like the water in
part.
Kubo, I saw that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's cool.
just kind of
With
the
this
but we-
cloth, yeah.
You know, honestly, we use CG. Every single frame is supported by CG. We paint things out. We have we extend sets. We now have characters that are in CG. We just prefer to have all our talking characters, all our leads, all our main in stop motion. But it's really part and parcel of every frame, right, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, our films are a hybrid, you know, and we're no longer limited to the tabletop, which historically stop motion you are, you know, with set extensions, we're able to utilize CG in the VFX department, and you know, instead of being limited to one animator animating the 13 puppets that they were able to make, you know, now you can have a crowd of thousands with CG VFX characters, and it's terrific.
I remember even when Chris was telling me the premise of the story of Missing Link, that it was a voyage all around the world with these amazing vistas. I was thinking, how is that going to happen on a stop motion set?
Well, that's
I
interesting.
know.
Yeah,
It just
thank you,
gets worse
VFX.
and worse, Ross. It just gets more and more ambitious. I mean, oh my God.
Yeah, but
Yeah, well,
that
got to
elephant
make a
walk-
challenge for yourself.
We ended up having to have we were thinking about the army, and we were just smart because we made it stylized. Like, talk about design yourself. They're all just like clones with different mustaches and stuff, so
Yeah.
we could just replicate the British soldiers going back into the
We do that too in CG. We try to make them kits and modular and just try to pay certain attention to little details so that you won't get bored, I guess.
It's interesting, all of those little cheats, or even using 3D, that you have to match the sensibility of physics, whatever that expressive kind of way that you have of doing it in whatever the you know, whether it's stop motion or 2D, that any 3D that you use has the same language in terms of how it expresses weight and how you've used your animation. Absolutely. And also, if you are doing something like that, like a crowd or whatever, your eye is so attracted to seeing pattern that people will just spot it, you know, immediately. So you have to be really careful with any of that kind of stuff, and always work against it to try and support whatever the primary medium is, whether it's
That is what's so hard. That's, I think, so much of our efforts, besides these like complicated, more technical movies, are our attentions to that, are keeping this whole world really whole. And like with Chris and I both at the beginning, early on in LAIKA, we thought, okay, if you're going to do something that's CG, it should have a rule. So, you know, all of the zombies can not have replacement animation. It can be mechanical, and CG will only be a ghost or whatever. But now we don't even have, or some directors don't care about those rules, so it's mixed up. So I just think that attention to detail, so we have a whole world and somebody doesn't pull out and say, how is that done? That is just an obsession, and that is, it's hard to calculate how much extra that is, you know, doing these movies.
Yeah, you don't want people to get lost and say, oh, that's so cool, I wonder how they did that in the middle of the story.
Or it just doesn't work, it pulls you out.
Yeah, it pulls you
But
out.
it's why LAIKA stuff is endlessly rewatchable, because there's just so much craft to take in, and it is very timeless. You can feel that attention to detail at every level, and yeah, you definitely see it. It really feels like work of people who are dedicated to their craft, as well as great filmmakers, great storytellers. You know,
We could say that about cartoon Saloon too.
I think so too.
Really.
It's nice.
I wish I could talk more. We've got to stop soon. I have one more question. You don't have to answer it. What's next? You may not be able to answer it. There may be secret stuff. So don't tell me any secret stuff.
I want to know Cartoon Saloon.
Nora's directing
Nora's-
the biggest feature we've ever made.
Yes, Nora?
I'm working on an adaptation of an American book, actually, by Ruth Stiles Gannett, called My Father's Dragon,
Right.
with Netflix. So that's in production at the moment. So we have a lot of people working at the moment on that. A lot of people working remotely because we've only 20 people in our studio right now. So everybody else is working from home. But it's going as though we're going in the studio, so that it's working out really well. So we're working on that. We also have a feature of Puff and Rock, which is a preschool series that we made a couple of years ago. So that's also in the works and in production now. So that's a preschool feature. Yeah, we've a number of things on the go. It's a great time to make an animation.
And how about over on the other coast?
We are working, I guess we're in pre-production. I don't guess. We are on the biggest, most ambitious movie.
Scary.
Perfect times to do it, when we're all separated. I'm saying that sarcastically, but we're moving along. And we're also just kind of paying attention about building our development back up and looking at all kinds of things, all kinds of projects and all kinds of things. So we're doing that as well, but unfortunately nothing I
Can't talk about it. That happens.
I just want to say again to whoever's watching, I'm sure they've seen the movie, but I love it so much. So good. It's so beautiful, and we were all talking about that before we got on with the more public interview.
Oh, thanks so much, guys. It means a lot, It means a lot because we have such massive respect for what you guys do as well.
Yeah, well, and we loved it.
Except when you get my name wrong in an art book.
I know that some
I
of you have
blame
lots of things to do today. So
Tebow wasn't born yet, but it was pretty much his fault. Sorry.
yeah, he's very young. He's a very young guy.
I'm just so happy to be here around you guys. Just amazing artists and directors. I'm just happy to be here.
I would like Tebow to stay here forever and ever, quite honestly, but also if you're gonna snap somebody.
Job security, Tebow. Job security. So I want to thank you all for spending time. We could go another hour. I mean, this is so much fun, but we can't because you guys got to get back to work and do stuff and all kinds of things. So I'm going to thank you all. I'm going to start with Ariane. Thank you very much. Tebow, thank you. Thank you very much. Brad, who is not related to Adam Schiff, the politician, but he'd like to be. And Tom, Nora, and Ross. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Frank.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Lovely
Frank.
Wave bye-bye. So
Lovely to meet you, Tebow.
see you guys.
Arian just gave you a pass to talk to us.